Well, hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Vince Grosso. I lead marketing and demand gen here at Lattice Software. I'm here with James Townsend. Welcome, James.
Thank you.
This is the first kind of fireside chat webinar we're doing here at Lattice HQ, bringing in a couple of our internal experts to ask them some questions, pick their brains about what's going on in the manufacturing space with technology, what we're hearing from our customers and prospects. James is our director of product strategy and somebody I go to and confide in when I have questions about the manufacturing industry, about manufacturing technology, and about how our products here at Lattice really optimize the environments that these companies are working in. So I'm excited to ask him some of the questions I have written down here from our customers and prospects. We also have the chat function up and questions up on the Zoom webinar, so feel free to go ahead and ask away questions there. We have the beautiful Whitney behind the scenes helping us out with the webinar platform, and she'll be shooting me some questions here up on my computer. And yeah, let's get into it.
Sure.
So, how are things going, James?
Going great.
Good?
Thanks, Ben.
Cool. Well, James, you want to start with just maybe some of your background. Where do you come from?
Sure.
How'd you make it to Lattice? And just what you think about what we're doing.
Sure. Well, at my core, I'm a product guy, so I have been in research and development really for the last 15 years or so of my career, and that has led me into systems and systems integration, specifically working with the sales front end, ERPs, and everything in between. So I've definitely, over that time, gained a very specific appreciation for the full end-to-end process that manufacturers go through when it relates to selling product, when it relates to configuring product, and ultimately manufacturing that product. So
what types of companies did you work with before?
Primarily medical device manufacturers, so highly regulated industries, very high-end, high-tech, and complex products, at least from a sales cycle perspective.
And how'd you make your way to Lattice?
So Lattice was a really great find for me, actually. So as over the years I've been doing systems implementation, one of the things that I've really struggled with is when you have a product that sells best visually, getting that visual in front of the clients, prospective customers, very early in the sales process. And the way that that's been done traditionally has been very haphazard, or in a Frankenstein-esque way, where you have to put a lot of systems together and do a lot of work, and it's tough to manage and tough to maintain. And what Lattice really does that excited me and brought me here was the visual configuration from the start of the process, from the first client engagement, and then also connecting all the dots and taking it deeper into the end-to-end process that the manufacturer needs to ensure accuracy throughout the entire sales process. So really exciting stuff going on here, really different, something nobody else is doing.
Great. And so you coming from the medical manufacturing side of things and bringing that context to Lattice, when we talk about manufacturing, manufacturers come in all different shapes, sizes, verticals, industries. What do we mean specifically when we talk about manufacturers?
Sure. So really the manufacturers that benefit best from this visual process would be ones that have a defined product, like they understand what their product is. Most of them would call themselves configure to order.
Okay.
But some also consider themselves engineer to order. And maybe that's a lot of the times due to the fact that they've thought they're more complex than they are, or that the decisions that go into the product definition are a little bit more challenging or tough to get to arrive at their final product, but they're really ripe for this capability to fully put a boundary around the product, allow the sales team full access to that boundary, and play within that sandbox of what they can configure, ultimately giving a visual that's completely accurate from the very first step of the process. And that visual can be translated into technical documentation that results in an as configured representation of the product in manufacturing. So any manufacturers that really benefit from visual selling and have a good understanding of how they manufacture their product are really right for this capability.
And do you see trends in the size of manufacturers, scale of manufacturers that are doing those types of selling activities or implementing those types of systems?
Absolutely. So really over the last 5 to 10 years, this capability has come about in different ways. And so we hear things like CRM and CPQ and terms that are pretty well known in the industry now, and a lot of manufacturers understand those and they know that they need them. But really what it comes down to is the CPQ, which is your configure price quote tool, doesn't today provide a visual or a really engaging visual process. You can answer a bunch of questions and then ultimately arrive at your product, which you can show visually. But to actually configure your product in a visual real-time interface is really unique and something that I'm really excited that Aladdle is providing to our customers.
Yeah, I know on the sales and marketing side, what I see very often is, we have a scale and a wide range of what we call digital maturity, but it's really, what types of technical systems you use across the organization. Mm-hmm. So we could have very large international manufacturers that from a digital perspective are very, very elementary, right? So using Excel spreadsheets, very archaic systems to accomplish these things at an international level, as well as we run into, companies on the far end of that spectrum where, hey, they may be a medium-sized manufacturer, but from a technological perspective, they're leveraging some very, very powerful tools.
Absolutely.
So, I'm very interested, and this next question leads into, I think, this talk track a little bit. I'm interested in how you see the shift in the manufacturing industry, right? And with the Industry 4.0 practices that we're seeing now starting to be used on the production side of things, creeping over into the sales and revenues operations side of these great companies. What can you talk a bit about the shift maybe you've seen over the last, let's say, 5 years in manufacturing in general?
Absolutely. So Industry 4.0 means a lot to manufacturers, and it's really a cutting edge way to look at the manufacturing space and how the products are ultimately fabricated, put together, assembly throughout the entire manufacturing process. And when we talk about Industry 4.0, we're thinking of the smart factory, the ability to have, beyond automation and robots and computer-assisted manufacturing, we're talking about connected systems that can really provide and feed data to each other, to their users as well. And that will definitely revolutionize the manufacturing space and gain a lot of efficiencies. The one thing that we've seen with manufacturers, intuitively, they understand it's kind of a garbage in, garbage out proposition. You can have the best manufacturing process in the world, but if your sales process and your front-end processes are not feeding well into the manufacturing processes, then it creates the same inefficiencies, waste, and struggles that the manufacturers see today. So Industry 4.0 has really yet to fully embrace, and something we advocate for a lot is an expansion into the sales process, making sure that anything that you're quoting, that you're selling visually or not, is readily usable by the manufacturer in their manufacturing operations. And that's really something that has to be considered in order to fully realize the Industry 4.0 goals, which will take a long time, but something that manufacturers need to consider today.
So, in the reading I've done on Industry 4.0, there isn't a lot of literature on the actual revenue side of what Industry 4.0 means to a manufacturing business. So are you seeing it as companies putting Industry 4.0 practices in place on the production side and now moving to the revenue side? Or is it something you're seeing, these companies attack from a holistic point of view?
Right, it's a mix. And I think, the Industry 4.0 element of it specifically has been the leading buzzword and discussion in these manufacturers or by these manufacturers. But I think intuitively every manufacturer understands that they need to consider the full end-to-end process. So they need a partner that's really going to work with them to understand how they can do things well on the front end when they embrace this entire investment chain from beginning to end. So what Aladdle provides in a visual configurator that's rules-based and provides accurate representation of the product from the very first steps of the sales process really should be a leading element to a manufacturer's decision around how they implement this smart factory and take advantage of this full capability set that's now available to them.
So let's talk a little bit about data in the same regard, right? So talking about front-end systems and systems on the production end of things and data flow back and forth. I know you've mentioned before talking about connected systems and connected data. What does that mean, and where is the real value there when we talk about implementing these tech stacks across an entire organization?
Sure. So with data specifically, we're really talking about feedback loops. We're talking about the ability to gather information and then take an action on it. So when manufacturers know this in their core, this is lean, this is Six Sigma, this is the ability really to take action and understand exactly why that data is being applied in the way that it is to make an improvement. And the same thing has to be true on the sales side. So as manufacturers want to tighten up their product, understand their definition a little bit better, they want to make better decisions around where they have gaps or understand where they have gaps, they need to be looking at data that's coming from the front-end sales process as much as they are from the manufacturing process. And the good thing with the sales process and getting data from that's relevant and speaks specifically to the product as it's being sold in the marketplace is that information can be dissected in different ways than operational information that's strictly based on orders. So you can look at quotes and see trends and patterns well before orders are ever coming in-house. So you can be a little bit more on the fly with your adjustments. If your product team wants to really take that and drive understanding and improvements in their market positioning as well in their go-to-market.
Yeah, I know we talk to a lot of manufacturers about their entire sales channel and gaining visibility, and closing the gap, I think, is probably the right way to talk about it, right? So if I'm a manufacturer with a very large supplier distributor network, gaining visibility into what the people selling my products out there are doing and being able to be both proactive and reactive from a sales perspective. How do I help them sell more of my product?
Exactly.
And so when we talk about Ladle's real value and the value of just using channel-wide sales tools, it sounds like you're touching on the point that having some visibility into what that sales rep for a supplier is doing gives me better insight into how to better produce my product, how to better position it, how better to sell it.
Right, you're exactly right. I think you said it right with the proactive versus reactive approach. Data helps you be proactive. It helps the sales process understand exactly how it's functioning, but it also helps the manufacturing team preemptively understand what they can expect as they do their planning and operations. That's key. I mean, that's fundamental when you have long sales cycles or you have long manufacturing cycles. The more data you can glean earlier on, the better.
Right. So, kind of riffing off the change we're seeing and these trends we're seeing in the manufacturing space with changes in the tech landscape. Are you seeing this cross industry and cross vertical as well?
Sure. Really, when we talk about a manufacturer's readiness for this, it's not necessarily tied to an explicit industry or a vertical within manufacturing. So we see clients engaging us across the board. Very complex products that are exceedingly challenging to understand. They're looking to understand and tighten them up and put a definition to them so that they can better provide that to their sales organization. We see products where there's just high volume, but variability. When we think of like automotive manufacturers, you think about like every car that's coming off of the line is different from the one around it. So you think about a manufacturing environment where that is the norm, configured to order, is really how these manufacturers define almost all of their internal processes and build their operations around that. So as manufacturers in any space embrace that and really start designing their manufacturing processes to allow for configurability instead of shying away from it, I think that that's a really important shift because that provides differentiation. It provides a way to connect directly more with their customers with specific products that the customer looks for. And it doesn't have to add the complexity that manufacturers have shied away from in the past because now it can be managed by a system that fully encompasses that end-to-end process and makes sure that what sales is doing is what manufacturing can actually produce.
So not being afraid of complexity.
Not being afraid of complexity, absolutely. Embrace it, actually.
Embracing complexity. I like that. So what does that mean from a systems perspective, right? So we've mentioned a few things already, CRM, ERP,
sure,
CAD systems even on the production side. What does that mean for me as a modern manufacturer trying to transition my business into these new practices?
Absolutely. And the investment has to be considered holistically. It can definitely be compartmentalized. So as a manufacturer seeks to make change, that often involves a lot of money. Some manufacturers that we work with are in low margin manufacturing environments. Some are in very high margin, and it really depends on how you can choose to invest over time. We take the position that it's best to understand your business as a process and understand your product as it exists with your go-to-market, and then try to bake that into your sales process as soon as possible, and make sure that the sales team, your dealers, distributors are all singing the same tune, they're all on the same messaging, they're providing the same product, they're configuring the same way. And that really helps manufacturers understand like really where they can make better operational changes, and then potentially that will drive more efficiencies in the investments downstream in the operations process as well.
And one question that we got before the webinar that is kind of in line with this track is how do I get my sales channel as a manufacturer to actually adopt these tools and practices? It's a struggle we often talk about with our prospects and customers, and deploying this great sales tool with a lot of great information in it to a wide variety of different types of suppliers and distributors. Mm-hmm. How do I get them to use it?
Right, and adoption's always the challenge, right? So we see a lot of interest for certain among different varied groups and age groups and processes that different sales teams have. I think the adoption into the dealer teams really is something that has been shied away from in the past, maybe out of fear, because you're exploring and providing quite a bit to a team that may not be fully trained or may not necessarily be as fully engaged with the product as an internal account manager would be. Which again, it comes back to why in the sales process, if you provide a tool that fully defines that product, allows you to configure within the realm of what you want individuals to configure, you can now very confidently provide that to dealers, to distributors who may not interact with it on a daily basis or may not interact with it multiple times a day, or have a large group of people that it's very tough to train and continue to maintain training. The system helps drive the selling process. It helps provide the rules and the accountability within the system to make sure that everything is staying neat and confined and within the realms of what you're looking to do as a manufacturer. So the adoption really becomes somewhat of a self-fulfilling cycle where essentially the dealers are using the tool, they're providing the information back to home base, if you will, and different changes can be made in the tool to help refine that process better and better, but confidence is the key. And it's both on the manufacturer side to feel confident that they can provide this, but also on the dealer's confidence to be able to show this potentially. And we advocate for client-facing, visual configuration to actually take this thing home with their dealers or with their clients directly.
So we had a question come in while you were speaking, and I'll riff off it a little bit. But the question is, how do I get started? And I think my question on that in that vein would be, it sounds like you have to take a big wealth of knowledge on the engineering side of my business and put it into an application for a sales guy that doesn't know much about what the engineering side does to then go sell to a customer. Mm-hmm. So how do I start walking down that road?
Right. So it's something that we definitely work with every client, every prospective client on, is understanding where they stand with their product, with understanding their product, with rules that govern their business. They're there. I guarantee it. Even if they're not in a document, they are in your subject matter experts' heads. They exist. After all, these manufacturers have been successful for a very long amount of time. It's a matter of really extracting that and understanding and building that into the tool. And we have specialists that really work with all of our clients directly to be able to do that. So I would advocate, if any manufacturer is looking to undertake this, I would say to try to pull the people together, the brightest that you have in your team, and try to really start understanding exactly where you want your product definition to be. And that will really help the process when we do engage and we do end up putting these tools in place. So for certain, that's a great place to start.
Okay. And so when we talk about implementing some of our lateral solutions, mm-hmm. If that's the first step, what's step 2 and step 3? Right.
So I think it depends on the manufacturer, of course, but CAD is an important player. So one of the things that we look to do to close the loop, and we like using that term a lot, closing the loop, it's important, is making sure that we're working off of legitimate, real engineering data. So as the product is designed, it's designed typically in a CAD tool, a CAD package. We look at that data, we try to understand how the product is designed, we try to make sure that that product can be, that information around the product can be built into decisions that are ultimately made by the user as they're in a three-dimensional space interacting with the product. And fundamentally, that CAD information, we then tailor our output from our system back to approach CAD so that CAD doesn't have to recreate things. It allows the engineers to feel confident that anything that was demonstrated on the front-end sales side, 1,000 miles away from their HQ, is exactly what they would do in front of their computer if they were, working the product in CAD, preparing it for manufacturing. So there's different elements. The product definition comes from the rules. It comes from understanding your product. It also comes from CAD and understanding how the product was designed. That's really the two main key elements.
So a question we get asked a lot on the sales and marketing side is where are the risks? We know a lot of manufacturers have tried to go through this process previously, and some have come out on top and some haven't. And so what are the risks in implementing some of these business changing practices and applications? And maybe some of your experiences you've seen working with manufacturers so far.
There are definitely some watch-outs, but this is, again, something where picking the right partner means all the difference in the world. So a lot of manufacturers, kind of to go back to the Frankenstein type, discussion, really have picked many tools across the spectrum that really were never designed to talk to each other, and they were never really designed to work with each other. It was more of a manufacturer's need to have a front-end sales management tool, as well as a product configuration tool, as well as a ERP, or maybe even an MES to actually run the manufacturing process. And I think as we've evolved over the last 5 years, and really Ladle, founded in manufacturing and rooted in manufacturing, understands this, we're really taking this end-to-end approach. So we look at the full landscape of what a client is doing across the systems that they maybe have already invested in, and figure out exactly how to insert this configurability, and maybe taking elements of the sales management into our world and providing tools to support that, to provide integrations and connections to other systems like ERPs or CAD systems to provide the information downstream to make this whole end-to-end process as efficient as possible. I think that is a risk that has been, a lot of people have horror stories about that. I would definitely say, I myself included over the years. So partnering up correctly and then understanding exactly how the landscape needs to look and working with somebody who can help understand where those gaps are and fill them for you is really, really critical and helps mitigate that risk.
So how much does timeline vary when talking about making these changes? How long does a typical manufacturing company spend making these changes, developing the systems and implementing them?
It takes years normally. Okay. So, and again, if we're just looking at the front end sales facing tools in the configurator, those projects generally, because of the management that was required to assemble all of these different elements and put these together, required a lot of overhead from the manufacturer to manage that. Business analysts and others to try to piece everything together and really paint the vision. So there was definitely a long timeline that was associated with that in the past. And what we seek to do is to reduce that dramatically. Our implementation process is much more rapid than that, and it comes from our understanding of asking the right questions from the get-go. With the first client engagement, we know exactly how to come in and understand the business and understand that it's not always a template approach. We definitely look at the details of every customer, their vertical, their go-to-market, their sales channels, their sales cycles. All of that plays into very different elements on how these features and tools need to be built out to support them.
So with all those moving pieces, who are the right people in an organization to be stakeholders in making these changes?
It's absolutely amazing to watch people in manufacturing organizations get elevated out of their roles to manage these things, and it's typically the highest talent. It's individuals that understand the product very well. So we're talking people from the R&D side, people on the account management side, internal quoting teams, they understand their product. A lot of them have a lot of tenure as well, and they're always the best to work with because they can just provide so much information, just a wealth of knowledge. We often joke that they need police escorts to the building just to make sure that nothing bad ever happens to them. But the idea is that turning those people from tribal knowledge and having that information in their head to becoming systems advocates and supporting the systems is really an awesome change to watch happen with these manufacturers as they modernize and mature.
Cool. And so we had a question come in while you were speaking as well. Could I conceivably abandon my current systems and run everything through your platform for a single input? I assume what that means is on the sales side of the business, given, let's say I use, your Franken application, as you called it. I have a few different sales applications out there used maybe internally and through my sales channel. Can I wipe the table clean and implement one tool to do everything end to end on the revenue side?
On the revenue side, it's possible to consolidate quite a bit for certain. So there's elements of CRM, there's CPQ, these other traditionally described acronyms. The functions that are baked into those largely can be streamlined and provided in one front-end tool. But again, it's really making sure that the front-end tool isn't always relevant to the manufacturing organization if it was a standalone. It really has to be connected with how companies understand their inventory controls, their part management, their engineering change processes, all of this on the back end as well. So we really do, connect with ERPs a lot, with CAD, to try to make sure that we're pulling the right information to the front end. But a lot of times, depending on the size and the complexity of the organization, it's possible, but it's something that we'd have to address with each and every implementation for certain.
Makes sense. So I have two more questions left here, but before we wrap up, the first is, if you had a room full of presidents and CEOs of manufacturing companies, what would you tell them, or what did you wish every one of them knew?
Right. So what I would tell them is, don't be afraid of the configurability of your product. I think a lot of times people that are in the know and the subject matter experts, they know how to handle things. They run the business and they run it largely without a lot of issues or without a lot of complaints or complexity or quality problems. But as that message translates upward in the organization, there's always this, we can provide the customer anything as long as it's black mentality, to quote Henry Ford. And that's not really how modern manufacturing is designed, and that's not what tools are now capable of doing. It's really possible to provide, this framework or the boundaries around the product and make sure that you can stay differentiated in your space. And what I would advocate is that manufacturers that embrace that are going to get a competitive edge. They're going to see a quick ROI from an investment like this. And their competitors who may not be as forward-thinking or not making these decisions are going to get left behind, especially as that manufacturer that does adopt this is now able to extend their investments into their manufacturing processes with confidence and really elevate themselves away from the rest of the market.
Great. So, my last question to wrap things up, and it looks like we're clear on the webcast as well. What's next for manufacturing and manufacturing technology? What's the next 5 years look like? It's
really, the last 5 years, I would say, is a prelude really to the next decade, maybe even the next 15 years. So manufacturers, as we mentioned, really have a hard time upending everything. So back to the user's question, or back to the audience question, can you abandon everything? That's always a difficult proposition for a manufacturer to completely retool, to use a manufacturing term. Or to completely relay out your lines, or do these other extensive activities. They require a significant investment. So what we definitely see with manufacturing over the next 10 years is a progressive shift towards modernization. Industry 4.0 is a great resource for where things are going to be going. But the front end, as I mentioned, is the key to really understanding what the right moves are to make as a manufacturer. So as we embrace new technologies, Internet of Things, augmented reality, there are a lot of capabilities there, but it's really important for each manufacturer to assess through data exactly what capabilities are wise for them to implement. And right now, 3D visual configuration is really one of those technologies that we see as probably the most ripe for a manufacturer to make a profound impact on their operations and their sales processes.
Great. Well, I like the sound of that, and I want to thank you again for sitting down and speaking with us. I love having these sessions with you. I always come out learning a lot. I hope everyone else out there does as well. If you have any questions in follow-up or anything on your mind now, feel free to tweet us, to go on our website, or email us at info@atlattosoftware.com. We'll get you answers as soon as we possibly can. And keep an eye out for emails following this webinar. We're going to be typing up some of the talking points here and some of the great answers James gave, and sharing those with you guys, as well as the video and audio recording. And we're looking forward to doing this again and finding out more about what goes on inside that mind of yours.
Thanks,
really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. Talk soon.
Thank you very much.